Gideon Marsh thought he had no problems. He ran 4,000 acres in the Texas Panhandle, 1,800 head of cattle, and a crew of 14 men, and the whole operation ran the way he liked it, which was the way it had always run. Then his late brother's widow arrived to stay for a week, looked at his books for one evening, and told him he was losing money on 3,000 of those 4,000 acres and had been for years. Gideon laughed at her. He was a cattleman. She was a banker's daughter from Kansas City who had never branded a calf in her life. What could she possibly know about his land? By the end of the week, he was not laughing. By the end of the week, Naomi Marsh had taken his entire operation apart, item by item, and shown him that the man who ran 4,000 acres without a problem had been quietly drowning for a decade, and had been too proud, or too stubborn, or too lonely to notice. She did not yell. She did not insult him. She did something far worse to a proud man. She was right about everything, and she had the numbers to prove it. Naomi had come to the ranch to settle her dead husband's share of the family land. Her husband, Gideon's younger brother Caleb, had owned a quarter of the operation. He had died of pneumonia in the winter. Naomi had inherited his quarter, and she had come to Texas to either sell it back to Gideon or understand what she now owned. What she found was a good man and a badly run ranch, and a brother-in-law who had confused doing things the old way with doing things the right way. This is the story of the week a woman audited a man's entire life, found everything that was broken, and in the process found the one thing he had that was worth keeping, which, as it turned out, was him. Naomi Marsh was 33 years old and had been raised understanding by the age of 12 that every business in the world was just a story told in numbers, and that the numbers never lied even when the people did. She had married Caleb Marsh in 1879. It had been a love match, and a good one, and it had lasted 5 years before the pneumonia took him. Caleb had been the gentle brother, the one who left the family ranch in Texas to make his own way, the one who courted a banker's daughter and read poetry and never quite fit the hard world he was born into. Naomi had loved him, and when he died, he left her a quarter share in a Texas cattle operation she had never seen and a brother-in-law she had met exactly twice. She could have sold the share by mail and never gone to Texas at all. But Naomi was her father's daughter, and her father had one rule above all others: never sell an asset you have not personally examined. So she packed a trunk, boarded a train, and went to see exactly what her husband had left her. Gideon Marsh met her at the station in Amarillo. He was 39, weathered, and visibly uncomfortable. He had loved his brother and had not known what to say to his brother's widow, so he said almost nothing, and the ride to the ranch was 40 miles of silence. Gideon assumed Naomi was a city woman who would take one look at the dust and the work and the loneliness, sign whatever needed signing, and flee back to Kansas City within 2 days. He had already decided to buy out her share at a low price, because he assumed she neither understood it nor wanted it. He was wrong on every count. Naomi understood the share precisely, and on her first evening in the ranch house, while Gideon was out checking the night herd, she did the thing that came to her as naturally as breathing. She found the account book, the first hole. By midnight, she had found 4 more, and Naomi Marsh understood that she had not inherited a quarter of a healthy ranch. She had inherited a quarter of a slow disaster, run by a proud man who could not see what was in his own books because he had never learned to read them the way she could. On the first morning, Naomi asked Gideon to ride the property with her. He agreed, expecting to humor a city widow for an hour. They rode for most of the day. Naomi asked questions the whole time, not cattle questions, money questions. What does this section produce? What does it cost to run? When did you last measure the grass against the herd? Gideon could not answer most of them. He ran the ranch by feel, the way his father had, the way it had always been done. He knew the land the way you know an old friend, but he did not know the figures. because the figures had never been written down in any way that meant anything. That evening, Naomi laid it out on the kitchen table. 3,000 of his 4,000 acres, she told him, were marginal grazing land that cost more to maintain, fence, and patrol than the thin cattle they produced were ever worth. He was running the whole spread because his father had run the whole spread, and he had never once stopped to ask whether the far acres earned their keep. They did not. They had not for 10 years. They were bleeding him slowly, and the profit from the good 1,000 acres was quietly disappearing into the loss from the bad 3,000. On the second day, she audited the crew, not their character, their cost. She found 2 hired men who were drawing full wages and doing almost no work, kept on out of loyalty because they had ridden with Gideon's father. She found a feed supplier who had been overcharging Gideon by 1/3 for 6 years because Gideon never checked the bills and the supplier knew it. Gideon defended all of it at first. The men were old friends. The supplier was a neighbor. This was how things were done. You did not treat your people like columns in a ledger. Naomi did not argue the point about loyalty. She simply showed him the numbers. Loyalty is a fine thing, she said, but you are not being loyal, Gideon. You are being robbed by men who are counting on you not to look. There is a difference between caring for your people and letting them bleed you. The first is honorable. The second is just pride dressed up as kindness. On the third day, she found the heart of it. The marginal acres were not just unprofitable. They were a monument. They were the land Gideon's father had died defending, and Gideon had kept every inch of it because selling any of it felt like betraying the dead man. Naomi understood this immediately because she understood grief. She had buried a husband. She knew what it was to hold on to something useless because letting it go felt like a second death. And here the audit became something more than numbers. Because Naomi Marsh looked across the kitchen table at this proud, grieving, drowning man, and she saw that the ranch was not really the thing she had come to examine. The ranch was a symptom. The real problem was a man who had buried his father and then his brother, and had decided that the way to honor them was to never change a single thing, even as the changing world quietly destroyed him. By the 4th day, Gideon had stopped defending himself. He sat at the kitchen table each evening and listened while Naomi laid out the truth of his operation, and somewhere in the listening, his resistance turned into something name exactly what was wrong, in order, with the figures to back it. The naming was a relief, even when it stung, but it was more than relief. Naomi did not audit him with contempt. She audited him with care. Every hard truth she delivered with the clear underlying message that the operation was worth saving, and so was the man running it. She was not tearing him down. She was, in the most literal sense, taking inventory of everything he had, including the things worth keeping. And there were things worth keeping. Naomi found those too. She found a man who knew every animal in his herd by sight. She found a man whose crew, the honest part of it, would have ridden through fire for him. She found a man who had kept his dead brother's favorite horse for 4 years and brushed it himself every morning, though he never spoke of it. The ledger could not measure those things, but Naomi could see them, and she wrote them in a different kind of ledger, the one she kept in her own heart. On the 5th evening, the work was nearly done. Naomi had a plan drawn up. Sell the 3,000 marginal acres, concentrate the herd on the good 1,000, replace the feed supplier, pension off the 2 old men honestly, rather than pretending they earned their wages. Within 2 years, she calculated, the ranch would earn more on 1,000 acres than it currently lost on 4,000. Gideon looked at the plan for a long time. Then he said the thing that changed the whole week. He said, "My brother used to say you were the smartest person he ever met. I thought he was just in love. I owe him an apology wherever he is. He was right." Naomi looked down at her papers. She said quietly, "Caleb saw things in people. It was his gift. He saw the good in this ranch when you could. Lamplight. Two people who had both loved the same dead man, and who had over 5 days of cattle and figures and hard truths come to see each other clearly. It was not romance yet, it was recognition. But on the frontier, recognition was almost always the thing that came first. On the 6th day, Naomi was supposed to leave. The audit was finished. The plan was written. Her week was up. She had come to examine an asset and decide whether to sell, and she had done both. The sensible thing was to sign her quarter share over to Gideon at a fair price, take the train back to Kansas City, and let the man run the ranch the new way. She packed her trunk. Gideon drove her to the station in Amarillo. The ride was 40 miles, and this time it was not silent, because they had spent a week learning to talk to each other. But as the station came into view, both of them went quiet, because neither of them wanted to say the thing they were both thinking. At the platform, Gideon said, "You fixed in 1 week what I couldn't see in 10 years. I don't know how to thank you for that." Naomi said, "You can thank me by actually doing the plan. Sell the far acres, fire the supplier. Don't let pride talk you out of it the day after I leave." Gideon said, "And the quarter share. Do you want me to buy it out?" And here Naomi Marsh, banker's daughter, who never made a decision without the numbers, made the one decision of her life that no ledger could justify. She said, "No." Gideon waited. She said, "My father has one rule. Never sell an asset you have not personally examined. I have examined this one. I have examined the land, and the herd, and the books, and the man. And the truth is, the most valuable thing on that whole 4,000 acres is not the cattle, and it is not the good 1,000 acres. Not as Caleb's widow, as your partner, in the ranch and in everything else." The train whistle blew behind her. The same sound that had nearly sent Eleanor Shaw home in another story, in another year. Naomi did not move toward it. Gideon Marsh, who had not known what to say to this woman on the first day, found that he did not need to say anything at all. He took her trunk back off the platform and set it in the wagon, and that was his answer. And Naomi understood it perfectly, because by then they understood each other completely. They married that autumn. The county thought it was strange. The cattleman and his dead brother's widow, the banker's daughter from Kansas City. They did not understand it, and Naomi did not bother to explain it. She had stopped explaining herself to people who could not read a ledger years ago. She ran the books. Gideon ran the land. They sold the 3,000 marginal acres within the year, and the buyer was a railroad that paid 4 times what the land was worth for grazing, because the railroad wanted the right-of-way, and Naomi had known that, which is why she had timed the sale the way she did. The money rebuilt the operation completely. Within 3 years, the Marsh Ranch earned more on 1,000 acres than it had ever lost on 4,000. It became one of the most efficient operations in the Panhandle, studied by other ranchers who could not understand how a smaller spread out-earned their larger ones. The answer was that Gideon's wife could read the numbers, and the numbers never lied. Theodore Roosevelt, who ranched in the Dakota Badlands in those same years, liked to say, "Do what you can with what you have, where you are." Naomi Marsh had taken a man who was trying to do everything, with marriage built on the rarest foundation of all, which was 2 people who saw each other exactly as they were and chose each other anyway. They kept Caleb's horse. Both of them brushed it, mornings, for the rest of its long life. Neither of them ever forgot the gentle brother, who had seen the good in both of them before they could see it in themselves, and who had, by dying, somehow brought them together. Naomi said once that she thought Caleb would have approved. Gideon said he knew it for a fact. Gideon Marsh died in 1921 at the age of 75. Naomi outlived him by 11 years and ran the ranch herself the entire time, sharper at 70 than most men were at 40. When she died, the operation passed to the 2 children she and Gideon had raised, both of whom could read a ledger before they could ride, because Naomi made certain of it. He ran 4,000 acres without a problem, or so he thought. It took a woman with a lamp and a ledger one single week to show him that the success he was so proud of was quietly killing him, and that the proud refusal to change anything was not loyalty to the dead. It was just fear wearing loyalty's coat. She audited his land, his crew, his books, and his grief. She found the disorder under the order, and in the middle of all that examining, she found the one asset worth more than all 4,000 acres combined, which was a good man who did not know how good he was. I think most of us have a Gideon in us somewhere. Something we keep running the old way, because changing it feels like a betrayal, when really it is just costing us more than we can afford. Sometimes the kindest thing a person can do for us is sit us down with the numbers and tell us the truth. Tell me in the comments. What is the thing in your life that you keep doing the old way, even though you know better? And if you want another story about a sharp woman and a stubborn man, the next one is ready for you right now.